The Heusinkveld One wheel rim, probably one of the most divisive wheel rims ever constructed for sim racers. And not really surprising, given that it looks like something from a science fiction film, crossed with something from 90s gaming history, mixed again with something you'd likely find in a light aircraft. Well, I've been using it for over 150 hours. Sadly, many of you guys watch those live streams. And in this video, I'm going to tell you my thoughts of this wheel. We're going to delve right into all the pros, all the cons, what you should expect, who this wheel rim is for, who it isn't for, and why you should subscribe so you can then unsubscribe when you disagree with me. You only get the power when you're a subscriber. Thanks to everyone that's also clicked the like button, and blessed be to all our channel members, subscribers and supporters. Without you, we wouldn't get stuff like this sent to us from companies to test and potentially break. Really appreciate it. I'm going to start by breaking all review conventions here. I'm not going to list the specs and go through all the boring stuff that's on the back of the box or that you could just easily read on the Housinkveld website yourself. First of all, let me just get straight to the biggest pro and what I liked most about this and what is absolutely the most notable aspect of using this Heusinkveld wheel rim. And that is, it's a very light wheel rim, it's a very stiff wheel rim, and it's also incredibly ergonomic. The end result is, when you're driving with this wheel rim, you can absolutely feel the force feedback from your wheelbase. I would say, at the moment, out of all the wheel rims I've got, we've got like 20 Fanatec's, Mosers, OSWs, real car wheel rims, lots of wheel rims. Out of all of the wheel rims I've got, this is the best wheel rim that I've used, that I would use to specifically feel the exact force feedback from a direct drive wheelbase that I've got. If I was reviewing a wheelbase and I wanted to feel what the actual motor feel of that wheelbase was, with all the filters and everything turned off, this is the wheel rim I would use. You can absolutely get a very high clarity from the force feedback wheelbase with this, which then means, of course, you can feel the force feedback from the racing simulator that you're playing incredibly clearly. That then means you can actually run lower force feedback and still feel the details. What you'll find is when you use heavier wheel rims and larger wheel rims, the wheel rim itself imparts inertia onto the wheelbase, making it harder for the wheelbase to operate, but effectively muting what the wheelbase is putting out. Also, the larger the wheel rim is, the more leverage that is, and again, the more that will hide the feel of your direct drive force feedback wheelbase. Sometimes that can be a pro. For example, with the original AccuForce wheel, the really old one, that had kind of a grainy feel to its stepper motor, and the larger wheel rim would hide that, whereas if you were using a tiny Formula rim, you would feel all those notches and bumps. So sometimes a larger wheel rim can actually help hide the feel of a wheelbase, or just colour a wheelbase a bit and give it a feel. But a small, super light wheel rim like this absolutely exposes, totally nudifies the feel of both the wheelbase and the force feedback of the video game that you're playing. And that is really what you want a wheel rim to do. You want the wheel rim to not get in the way. You want the wheel rim to be there, feel exactly what's happening, and then if you want your force feedback to be a different type of inertia, a different type of smoothing, a different feel, you can then adjust that in the software. You're not going to be limited by your wheel rim or the hardware that you're using. And so that's an absolutely fantastic thing about this wheel rim from a raw force feedback perspective, and what has really blown me away with this wheel rim. As a side note, if you're never planning on getting a Housinkveld wheel rim, I would say as well, you have wheels like the Fanatec McLaren wheel rim. It's now another wheel rim. They've rebranded it. There's also some very light Moser wheel rims. But generally, like really light, solid wheel rims, I think that's absolutely the best if you're going for pure force feedback feel and you want to be able to get the most out of a sim's force feedback. Deep breath. Let's be honest. This looks like I've stolen it out of the Batmobile. And I don't think you'd likely see something that looks like this in the shop window of, say, a Rolex store. It's not really the supermodel of the wheel rim space, is it? it's not what many people would describe as visually beautiful. And that is very obviously a result of it being designed entirely around ergonomics and functionality. And when you use it, and especially if you use it for a while, you really start to notice and appreciate that. Before I delve a bit deeper into that aspect of the ergonomics, I first want to go over the buttons, encoders, and the sort of feel of the actual clickiness of it. What I would say is that the buttons feel quite nice to actuate. They've got a very positive click. I'm never misclicking the buttons or not feeling like I've pushed them enough. The resistance of the button is such that you're not going to get finger fatigue. But the buttons are not as clicky as I'd maybe like, or they don't feel like super duper high-end buttons. Weirdly, this is a really big inconsistency across all wheel rims. I've used like £3,000 wheel rims, even real GT car steering wheels have buttons on them that feel awful, and then some cheapo wheels out there have absolutely fantastic feeling buttons. Obviously, there's a degree of subjectivity as to what you like from buttons and how they feel, but yeah, I would say the buttons sort of feel, in terms of the clickiness of them, the actuation of them, is in that kind of mid-range territory. It's not bad, but it's not something you're going to go, oh, that feels so nice to push. You know, it's not like the mechanical keyboard satisfaction or that kind of thing. The button faces themselves are actually quite a nice plastic finish on them, feels really nice and solid. I don't think the text is going to wear off them anytime soon. And also, the nature of the buttons, they feel perfectly fine if you're wearing gloves and using them with gloves as well. The rotary encoders as well, they have a nice positive sort of movement to them. Each step is very defined. There's this sort of a little bit of a dampened nature to it, to the step. It's not a decisive click to it, but you can really feel each notch of each indentation for the rotary encoders, and you're not going to accidentally actuate the rotary encoder. There's a nice resistance there, so that when you're just pushing it with your thumb, it works as you would want it to. There's also on the rotary encoders a sort of nice kind of gummy kind of rubbery texture that even with your finger is easy to grip onto, even if your fingers are sweaty, and even with gloves it's very easy to reach out and feel those rotary encoders and access them without looking at them. You also, in addition to the buttons and the rotary encoders, of which there are many of them, you have these sort of funky joysticks with the up, down, left, right, and the rotation, and again another button. These are actually lighter and more clicky. Again, sort of in that mid-range kind of feel of actuation and button feel. I would say with these funky joysticks, though, that the up, down, and left and right doesn't feel as decisive or as nice to use as the other buttons. So I put these a little bit lower than sort of mid-tier. Again, not really had any problems with them. I've not done any misclicks or anything, but they're just not as satisfying or as clear to use as they could be. Additionally, the tiny rotary encoders, compared to the ergonomics of everything else, I found can be harder to access and find when you're not looking or you're wearing a VR headset than all the other buttons. So I'd use these for like features and functions you're not going to be using all the time, which is a shame really, because I think maybe one of these rotary funky joysticks being a bit bigger would have been really nice, because then it could be like a pit stop menu option or something where you're changing settings on the fly, but they're a little bit harder to like really positively feel. So that's actually these little funky joysticks, nice to have, but I think they could have been a bit better actually, to be honest. In terms of the actual shifters and the clickiness and feel of the shifters though, really positive click. Both shifters can also go up and down, so you've got like dual way actuated shifters. Again, I would say the sort of actuation of these shifters is kind of in that mid tier for like a high-end wheel rim. It's not as satisfying of a click that you get with some other wheel rims, even some cheaper wheel rims and even some more expensive wheel rims. But you're not ever going to misshift. I never misshift with these. It's functionally absolutely fantastic, but it doesn't quite have that total satisfaction on the click. And then this is probably the worst aspect of the wheel rim, is when you push away from you on the shifters. That is the worst feeling part of this whole wheel rim. Like, again, there's a click there. I've used it. I'm not misclicking. It functions perfectly fine, but there's a sort of like mild gratiness to that actuation. It's not quite satisfying, you know. it's not like the fidget spinner satisfaction. It just doesn't feel quite right. But I've not had any stuff change on it. Again, the resistance is fantastic. I'm not getting finger fatigue. Functionally fantastic. I'm sort of nitpicking on the absolute end feel. Really nicely, you can actually adjust without using any tools how much the shifters go in and out, which is absolutely fantastic. So for me, I quite like lighter shifters. So being able to just push this out as well means I can reach it easier, and then you also get a bit more leverage, so that makes the shifter a bit easier to actuate. But both sides have that option on it. Really nice. It's the kind of thing you just set and forget though, but so it wouldn't really matter if it used a tool or not, but at least you don't have to. I think you can also actually open this up and do stuff on the insides there, but I'd check with Housinkveld support before you do stuff like that. I haven't gone into that because I've just been too busy hammering it in its out-of-the-box state, really. Also, you have these two analog clutches at the back here. You can adjust how much throw these have, and I assume you could swap the springs out of them if you wanted to. I haven't felt like I need to. The default on them is that they are really quite stiff. They don't have a huge amount of travel, but this means that it's actually really easy to be super precise when you're using them as a clutch for like launch control, or if you're doing it totally manually. Often with launch control you set like a value on one side and a value on another side, and then that allows you to just sort of do launch control without thinking about it, and you know, you work it out beforehand and then just release it. But even if you're using this as an actual clutch totally manually, or maybe like a throttle or a brake, some people with accessibility needs, they might look onto using this as like a very precise throttle, a very precise brake, and you will have very good control over the analog axis, with each of these having its own analog axis, which is really nice. A lot of wheel rims, these are combined axis or just only one option. Really nice. Also, you do have this sort of, again, more ergonomics here, a little bit of a curve on the plastic and a bit of shapeliness to the plastic for the clutch that then allows you to really feel with your finger where you're at on the clutch pedal. And it feels superb when you're holding on to it. That might depend on how big and chunky and fat your fingers are and how big your hands are, but for me, they're just absolutely fantastic. Just that feel, the reach of them when you're holding on to it, absolutely awesome. And no like hand fatigue or anything from that. So that's the button side of it. Hopefully that covers the buttons enough. The biggest thing though with the ergonomics, save the best to last here, the biggest thing with the ergonomics though are these hand grips, and how these hand grips feel when you're actually holding onto the wheel and driving. And on the face of it, you might not notice this and it might seem really subtle, but the way this is molded, at least for my hands, and my hands either naked or in gloves, it feels so good. It feels so solid. It's quite a thick grip in many ways, but then also it's quite, you've got a lot of space in this sort of thumb box area. And then the shape of the edge here is such that you can like really hold onto the edge of it, but then not have to like squeeze. This wheel basically sits in your hand without you having to grip onto it. It sort of automatically rests in an optimal position for just holding onto the wheel, and then you're not going to get that grip fatigue that you can have, especially with like much thinner wheel rims or certain designs of wheel rim. It's so ridiculously comfortable. And then one really weird thing I noticed with these grips when I'm driving in VR is that even if I was driving a car inappropriately using this type of GT Formula wheel rim, even if it's a circular car in the game, this thickness of grip kind of, I'm not letting go of the wheel, and the thickness of the grip kind of makes it just feel like, oh yeah, I'm holding the circular wheel in the simulator. It makes sense, it lines up, even though obviously it's not a circular wheel, so don't let go of it. But yeah, the grip feel on this is absolutely fantastic. Really worth noting as well, this sort of edge ergonomics, and this is one of the reasons why I like the OMP Trecento wheel rim. The edge ergonomics is such that if you want to relax one hand over another hand and dominate with one hand for turning more than the other hand, so in my case I tend to get tendonitis in my left hand, so I have to remind myself sometimes to drive more with my right hand. But yeah, if you do 12 hours of live streaming every day, you kind of have to just make things work so that your body doesn't fall apart. Really nicely, it doesn't really matter which hand you're dominant with, and also you can sort of, if you've pushed too far over or you're doing a tighter turn and you've got a bit of force, you can really use the palm of your hand to bring the wheel back and control it, and again not have to do a really tight grip on the wheel. And it's really good. It's a stupidly small thing really, but if you do tons of sim racing, those sorts of things really do stand out. Weirdly as well, there's like this little ledge thing here when you're holding onto the wheel. Your finger here, if you're not actually on the shifter, some people rest their fingers on the shifter. I like to rest my fingers here when I'm not using the shifters, and so I actually tend to do this with my shifters, right? So you've got this little ledge for your finger. It's like you're doing rock climbing. You've got a little sleeping area. They need a little cafeteria here so that your finger can have a cup of tea, have a break, just chill out, you know. Sleeping bag, toilet facilities. But it feels so nice to just rest your finger there whilst you're driving. It's just weirdly comforting. I know that's probably a bit too much ADHD, but I love stuff like that. So the ergonomics, absolutely fantastic for the feel of it. Does have too much positivity there. Does have a big downside to the ergonomics though, and that is there's some medieval spikes on the bottom of the wheel. Now, they're not that bad if you let go of the wheel and it jabs you a little bit. They're not going to cut your hand off. However, I get my thoughts are that they probably tried to trim this down and make everything as small as possible so they've got as minimal mass as possible on the outside of the wheel. So it's like reducing rotational inertia, I think is the term. Probably wrong, I'm an idiot. But the problem is these, if you do let go of the wheel or the wheel's going crazy, you know, you're having a magical madness DD wheel moment due to simulators being how they are, these can jab your hand if the wheel's going crazy, and that is not a good thing. So you learn very quickly to not let go of the wheel and to be aware of the bottom of these potentially spiking you. I'm not sure. I think maybe it would have been better if these were connected somehow at the bottom, or if this was smoothed off different. But that ergonomically, that's like the only really big downside I've had with these grips. But then having these go down so far also feels really great. So, you know, swings and roundabouts in some ways. I also, me personally, I'm not the biggest fan of GT or Formula rims. I would like this to be a circular wheel with all its functionality. That's what I want, is a circle. Same thing, but with a circle, same grip ergonomics. That would be absolutely perfect. But out of all the GT style Formula rims I've used, this on balance is the nicest to hold, and sort of functionally for the grip side of it, it's the nicest one that I've really used for a long period of time. So absolutely awesome on the ergonomic side. Now, this is not a screen. This is a shiny piece of plastic on top of LED lights. LED lights for the RPM gauge, LED light for a Heusinkveld logo, which I think doesn't look very good, to be honest. Not the logo, but just having the logo in the middle of the screen. You can turn the logo off with the software, so you don't have to look at it. I would rather have a picture of a beautiful lady there rather than a huh. But, you know, maybe if you like the letter H, that's nice to have there. And then you've got some flag LEDs at the bottom, all configurable through SimHub. I do think it's a real shame that it looks as if it should be a screen. I think if it's not a screen, it shouldn't look like it should be a screen. I think that's, for me, that's a really negative of the design of this. But because it is just LED lights, and because this is a wireless wheel rim that uses a dongle to connect it to your computer, what that does mean is that you get the RPM gauges and the lights and everything but they don't use up the battery as much as a screen would, and you can use this for many hours. I think we got about 70 hours, 60 hours on it before the battery got to like 10%, and that's with everything on maximum brightness, and that's also literally driving 10 hours a day. It also turns itself off automatically and turns itself on when you first push a button, so you don't have to manage that. Really, you don't have to worry about battery life on this, so that's absolutely fantastic, to be honest. But that's the sort of thinking, I believe, behind how this is. It really does grate on me that that's not a screen, that it looks like a screen. What were they thinking? Also, companies that do this, Heusinkveld. Is there another one? Probably on the inside of it, and then a H here. The design of this wheel is the branding, the quality and nature of it is the branding. I do not need to be reminded from every single angle that it's it's a Sony, it's a Canon. It's like, oh God, I don't care about the brand. Like, really, I don't care. It's good marketing, isn't it? Especially if you were to give a wheel to a live streamer and then it's on the screen and then everyone can see what it is. Okay, I get it, but Moser, everything has brands all over it. God, get rid of it all. Scrape it off. And I think it speaks for itself. I think the wheel, it speaks for itself, Bloody marketing people. If it weren't for estate agents, the marketing people would probably be some of the worst people on earth. Fortunately, I don't involve myself in any marketing at all, so I'm completely innocent and a great person. Now we delve into the highly arousing software side of things, but also the connectivity side of things. As I said earlier, it's a wireless wheel rim, and it uses a wireless dongle that you plug into your computer to then communicate the wheel rim to your computer. You'll then need to use a quick release that's compatible with the wheelbase that you're using. In this case, we're using the Moser quick release, and we're also using a Housinkveld universal adapter. So if you do get one of these wheel rims, you'll want to make sure what type of quick release you already have for your wheelbase, and you'll also want to decide if the pattern, the screw pattern, is one that might work straight away, or if you need to get the Housinkveld universal adapter. But basically, once you've got your quick release on there and it's mounted to your wheelbase, and it's mounted to your wheelbase, plug the USB Housinkveld dongle in, and it is, in many ways, plug and play. Like, Windows immediately picks it up as an input device and you can bind buttons. Of course, you would really be expected to be using the Heusinkveld SmartControl, which gives you an insane, absolutely insane amount of options for how you can bind buttons and how the buttons operate. We'll go into that a little bit more in a second. But also, you use SimHub to control the LED lights on this wheel rim. So the RPM LED lights, how they light up, the colour, the nature of them, all controlled through SimHub. You can then also control the flag and sort of telemetry LED lights, pitting, all that kind of stuff, traction control. You can control that stuff using SimHub. Now, where this is really pretty mind-blowing, though, is the sheer number of buttons you already have on the wheel rim, but then the fact that in the SmartControl software you can have an alt function by pressing the function button, which then lights up this FN light here, which you can also make it so it doesn't light up, but press a function button, and then basically that's now a whole another layer of buttons. If you've got the function button on, you've just doubled every single option on the wheelbase. If you want to, it doesn't have to. The function button could just go to a thing where half the buttons are different or some of the buttons are different. You could literally set it up to however you want. You can also set it up so you can actually have a long hold feature on buttons, and that will do a different setting as well. So you can effectively go almost infinite with the amount of buttons and what you do with those buttons. Through the SmartControl software, you can then select, when you've got the button selected here, you can then go and choose the nature of how that button actuation will then come up in Windows or be detected, and then you can then choose what the output is. And those outputs could be buttons, like a standard game control device button option. It could be the same button for different buttons. They don't have to be independent buttons, but then it can also be stuff like hat switches, keyboards, macros, it's endless. It's absolutely endless, and that option is available on every single button on this device. So let's say you've got all your driving buttons bound normally, like you just load up your game, bind it normally, but then for the function, which you can set any button to trigger the function if you wanted to, you can then have it that those function buttons are maybe Windows macros, or maybe something to do for your VR headset, or whatever you want. It is all possible with the binding and the configuration of the SmartControl app. The SmartControl app also integrates with other products like the pedals, and you can set up the pedals and everything, and then you could use the wheel to trigger different pedal configurations, throttle sensitivity, whatever you want. It's absolutely insane. Now, personally, I would say you can go too far with that and get lost in button software fiddly land, which I never do myself. I'm very careful not to waste time in menus. You can waste a lot of time doing that instead of just driving, and you really don't need to do any of that. You can just focus on the basics of driving and the basic bindings. But I have to say, out of all wheel rims that I've used, this is like insanity levels of customization. I just put the telemetry demo on here so you can see all the lights illuminating like a Christmas tree. Whatever you can imagine, whatever you can bind, it is possible with this wheelbase. Now, I would say, though, can't be entirely positive. Sometimes your tea runs out. The user interface on this is not intuitive. The SmartControl options, how you bind stuff. If you're doing basic stuff, like a regular output, that's not too complicated. You can do that quite quickly. But a lot of the more advanced options and the way you address stuff and go through it really isn't obvious to just do through basic fiddling. I'm pretty familiar with user interfaces in general, and this has taken me quite a bit to get my head around it. And being completely honest, I've not used all the features or anywhere near all the features and binding and options that you can do with this. I haven't felt that I've needed to be honest. Like, there's enough buttons with just the function and the basic stuff. But it's quite a lot to get your head around. Interestingly, though, as well, actually, and quite useful on this user interface, see the battery life in the bottom corner. We're down to 62% after doing one recharge. Maybe done like 2 weeks of using this. Either way, that's nice to know where the battery is. When the battery gets low on the wheel, you actually get a light illuminating, letting you know that you've got like at least 15 hours left. So again, there's no. I really like that there's no sort of battery anxiety with this. It's totally seamless. And then no cable as well, because it's totally wireless. So that's absolutely fantastic. I would also say as well, the SmartControl software, I have not had it crash once, or any sort of software bugs or things not register or things not work once on the software side. And then SimHub as well. Well, SimHub is just a genius software as well. That's I've never had that crash. I think I've used SimHub for 5 years. It's never crashed. I've never had problems with SimHub. It's insane. Software that works that well blows my mind. The only downside, though, with the dongle, and what I have seen as a problem with the dongle, is if your USB ports are completely data saturated. This is probably not a scenario for most people, but if you're using like I've got a Quest 3 headset here, I've been testing this, and when you use this with like really high bit rates, data rates, and you've also got your USB completely stacked on your computer, if your USB ports are totally saturated with data, then you can start having issues. That's not really the dongle's fault or the wheel's fault. It's just to do with your computer's USB bus and bandwidth. But that is something to be aware of if you've absolutely ramshackled your USB and you're using the USB for something like sending video out to a VR headset. It's probably quite a niche scenario, but that's the only issue I've had with the dongle side and the software side of the wheelbase, and that's not really Housinkveld's fault. That's just a USB architectural issue. So yeah, absolutely superb software, absolutely superb customization, and an infinite amount of bindings that you could possibly ever want to have on a wheel rim, to be honest. So who, in my opinion, is this wheel rim suited towards, and who would most likely enjoy owning one of these? Well, the pricing of this wheel rim is around €600. I've seen it also online for about £550, but also consider you will need to get, in all likelihood, or very likely, you'll probably need to get the Housinkveld universal adapter, and you'll also need to get a quick release for your wheelbase if you haven't already got the universal quick release to attach to it, so that's going to add to the pricing. But for that 600 or so euro price point, what you're getting here is a really nice featured wheel rim that's not in the mega high end pricing, but it's definitely not in that budget and affordable pricing. And in the wheel rim space at the moment, you know, if you're on a budget, there's some really amazing wheel rims for like even sub £400, sub £300, your Moses, your SimMagics. So it's a very competitive space if your goal was just having a great feeling, lots of button wheel rim. So where does this really stand out? The defining features are the sheer ergonomics and how comfortable it is. I can't think of a GT style wheel rim that I've found more comfortable to hold on to. A wheel that I can not have to squeeze and just it sort of naturally fits into your hands. Just feels absolutely superb. It's a real joy to hold on to and drive cars with it. I'd also say just the solidity of it is, for the price point, it's incredibly solid wheel. It feels like it's some kind of like science fiction device in its solidity, especially given how light it is. Often we associate lightness with it not being solid, but it's light and solid, and to me that's actually more futuristic. I'd also say as well, it doesn't rattle at all, which is a really common problem across a lot of even quite nice wheel rims on the market. Again, just super solid. So I'd say if you were looking for an absolute utilitarian approach to a Formula or GT style wheel rim, this is probably up there, if not the most utilitarian wheel rim on the market. It ain't the sexiest wheel rim, it ain't the shiniest wheel rim, but it does the job of a wheel rim really damn well. And rather concerningly, I think this is going to be a wheel rim that I'll be using a lot whilst live streaming, and especially whilst playing racing simulators in VR. Hopefully you found this review video useful, interesting, and answered some of your questions. If you have any more questions and want to know more about this wheel rim, ask in the comments section and I'll try my best to answer them. But until the next one, thanks for watching this. Happy tea drinking. Take care and goodbye.